Underworld Dealings. Greetings, X. There's a topic that I've been interested in for a very long time, and it's something I've been trying to do as much research on as I possibly can to find out more details and hear more personal accounts. The topic is on parts of towns and cities that are shady or less legal, I guess you could say, and hearing more about what goes down in the underbelly of our world. I'm talking about services in your city that people are not aware of or shouldn't be aware of, like hitmen for hire, or people who can help you fake your death or wipe you from the government or of our records entirely. Kind of like the guy from Breaking Bad who runs a shop but is able to give Walt an entirely new identity, license, and residency in a new state to get the heat off of him. Maybe you even know someone capable of bugging a house or hacking into cameras or something and running surveillance on individuals you are interested in. I want to hear absolutely everything that you have heard about in your city or town. It could be anything at all. Something that maybe you witnessed personally. Maybe someone from a different state told you about something that happened to them. Or maybe you've just heard vague rumors floating around about some underground base somewhere in the neighborhood. I want to know as much as you possibly know. Like, if you go to blah blah street and go down the alley, there is a secret entrance into a basement that takes you into an old military bunker that has all sorts of gear inside of it, etc. And be as detailed as you possibly can, and list every piece of gear that you saw and stuff. If you're worried about your location being revealed, or possibly getting into shit for sharing info someone has trusted you with, then you can definitely censor certain details, and maybe keep the area and identities of those involved a lot more vague. I know this board is technically for paranormal happenings, but let's be honest, this board is slow as all hell and went to shit a long time ago, and speculating about the elite and the occult and the underworld seems to be a lot more of interest these days than telling scary ghost stories to one another. I know it's definitely more interesting for me at the least. Okay, OP, I will bite. I've heard about some crazy shit going down on the borders between Hong Kong and China. My family are from Hong Kong and have told me more stories than I could count about the horrible shit that has been done to our people. I heard stories from my family about drugs being smuggled in all kinds of ways, both from here to China and the other way around. I'm talking dismembering wild animals and inserting drugs like MDMA into them in a plastic bag or something and attempting to bring them across. The most commonly smuggled drugs here are things like MDMA, cocaine, and heroin, and people will do almost anything to get their hands on it. A lot of international drug dealers operate both in Hong Kong and China, and have direct links to people in the USA and often import over there for a tidy profit. They use human trafficking rings to acquire drug mules and get them to use the cliche method of stuffing the product in a condom or something like that and having them ingest it and then retrieving it later from the mule's defecation. It's not just anyone that they get for this. They use young children quite often, as they are less likely to suspect a child of any wrongdoing, and a lot of licenses for security guards strictly prohibit the searching of minors outright, or at least without a suitable guardian present who can consent for them. It could easily give them a bad reputation, or even get them fired if they approach everything all wrong, so they slip through the cracks much more often. That is not all though. I've heard of these children sometimes being smuggled in barrels along with the drugs or with other product as like an extra safety blanket to avoid any suspicion. I'm not sure exactly how it works or how it helps, but that's the rumor that I've heard. Sometimes it's purely for trafficking reasons though. I did hear one more rumor along the lines of the dead animal one. I heard that there has been incidents where the drug dealers had actually murdered these children before putting them into the barrel and stuffing as many drugs inside their body as they possibly could to increase profits. But this sounds very unlikely to me, and more like something that a kid on a playground made up just to be edgy. I have one from my hometown in Scotland that is a little mundane compared to all of the crazy stuff in this thread, but where I live, it is a massive scandal. So this happened in a really small Scotland town. I am not going to say where, as the population is not massive and would make it very, very easy to find out who I am, or at the very least to track me down. There have been rumors floating around for a long time of an underground drug trade operating out of this small town. I don't think they have a countrywide reach or anything that crazy, but they kind of have a grip on the local area and all of the surrounding towns not connected to a major city. They are set up in all kinds of different shops and even in some residential areas. They don't operate out in the open per se, but it is clear that they really do not give too much of a fuck about being caught or shut down. I don't know whether that's confidence or cockiness or what, so I assume they have some kind of connections with law enforcement or in the government. They own different shops and companies that don't actually make or sell what they advertise, or if they do, then it's only a very small amount of the time. These are all used as a front just to peddle drugs to whoever will buy them. They own a small corner shop and even a hairdresser, and there is keywords and things that you can use to buy their products. I have never been in one personally that they own or know the keywords, but it would be something like, take 3 carrots to the counter and say that you want them double bagged, and they will charge you however much money and then put a bag of cocaine in there with your groceries. Or I've even heard that they sometimes stuff the drugs inside the vegetables and just add the extra one with the product inside to your bag. We have all kinds of weird stuff happening in London, which makes sense if you've seen any memes or jokes about the place and the crime rate. There is rumors about a certain shop in the middle of the town. This is in West London, just so you know, around Southall, that on the outside looks like a normal Chinese food place, but actually doubles as a place that sells weapons. I'm not talking guns smuggled in and stuff like that, otherwise the police would have been on them a long time ago. I am talking about crazy knives and I'm talking massive swords like machetes and scimitars and other crazy stuff. I have no idea if there is a password or if you need to be referred by someone, but I would not doubt that something like that goes on in the area. Southall is a major shithole though, and is quite rough. There is some decent areas, but there is a lot of young people and a lot of poverty coupled with a high crime rate that makes just existing there very scary. The Chinese place also gave me food poisoning and my noodles were fucking cold, which was a rip-off, but that's by the by. Speaking of Chinese places, I was personally involved in a really messed up incident that happened in Chinatown in New York City when I was maybe 13 or 14 years old. It was quite a while ago now. I will green text it for you to make it a little easier to read, but damn, this is the one thing that really sticks with me each and every day and makes me wonder if maybe I could have done something differently and helped a lot of people to be saved from a horrible fate. I still feel so guilty over the whole thing. I was probably around 13 or 14 years old when this happened. This must have taken place in around 2008 or something. I was living in New York City and had lived there for my whole life. My parents were decently wealthy. I mean, they had to be to live in New York City, especially to have a kid there, but they were not really around a whole lot. They always had to be away for work trips and meetings and the like. So, for days at a time, when I wasn't at school, I was left entirely to my own devices and had to make my own entertainment. I had to make my own food, do my own shopping, that kind of stuff. This means that I would go out with friends of mine and ended up doing really dumb shit just to pass the time that I wouldn't otherwise be doing, like exploring a tunnel system that we found. That's another story entirely that I can tell if anyone is interested, and doing a lot of urbexes and the like. So, this one time, I was out with a friend who I will call David, and we are just goofing off in Chinatown and window shopping and stuff, and considering maybe buying some food to eat. Our parents had cash, but would not really give us any, so that's why we were not balling out and making it rain. There's actually a few abandoned places around Chinatown that we had heard about that are fun to goof around in and to explore, so that's why we were there. We were really into exploring abandoned places and stuff like that. There were a few shitty ones we heard were haunted or whatever, and it sounded interesting enough to us. I also heard that the East Broadway Mall was kinda turning into a steaming pile of shit and was gonna turn into a ghost town any day now. That obviously never came true, Lamau. And there was also apparently an access tunnel underneath it that connected to a few other buildings and could let you get into any shop in the entire mall, but we never found it, so it was probably just an urban legend. So anyway, we were just walking around Chinatown, and as usual, it was absolutely crowded with people. Like, it was difficult to walk even just a few steps because there were so many people. You couldn't even put your arms out to your side. That's how little space that you had. Chinatown usually has a ton of stalls selling cheap bootleg items for any big name designer brand that you can think of. Also selling stuff like jewelry and shoes and the like, but this is normal and isn't anything of note. Me and David are looking around one stall that is selling Pokemon cards and Yu-Gi-Oh cards and the like for dirt cheap. They are very obviously fake though, and are just printed off of the internet and stuck on the front of crappy cards and laminated or whatever. Or sometimes the back was printed too and stuck onto crappy cards, which was easy to tell were not official. Some were in foreign languages like Spanish and Chinese and had alternate card art or hilariously fake card art that ranged from looking like a third grader's drawing or like it was done by a Rule 34 artist. Seriously, one of them had a war turtle on it with a tail that was drawn to be very obviously phallic and was veiny and pulsating instead of its usual short hand-curled tail. Some little old lady comes up to us and asks if there is anything at the stall that interests us. We tell her that we're into the cards, but that these are fake ones and that we are not very interested in spending money on fakes, no matter how cheap that they are. Then she tells us in an old rickety voice that the fake ones are just here as a disguise so that people can not just run off with their rare and valuable cards. She said that she kept the rare cards and the first editions and such in storage and only takes people down there who clearly have the cash or know their stuff, like us. She says that we clearly know what we are doing and tells us that she will take us into her storage room just around the corner and will let us see her rare cards. I know what you're thinking at this point. This is the most obvious trap in the history of the world, and you are either a massive dumbass or this is the fakest shit I've ever read. We were young and stupid, yes, but this lady looked to be around 90 years old or something and is obviously quite frail. Both David and I were carrying knives on us because we've lived in New York City long enough to know that the police are not competent enough to help you if anything goes wrong, and that you can only help yourself if you get into a dire situation. If we were old enough to be carrying guns, we definitely would have been, especially with the places that we were exploring. We didn't think that this old lady had an evil bone inside her body. We were armed and overconfident. We thought if she tried anything that we both could take her. And there were so many people around, she would have had to have been stupid to try anything at all. Anyway, she leads us just around the corner where there is a little bit less foot traffic, and she leads us down some stairs. We were definitely on high alert, but again, we knew that we had an out. The stairs go down further and further, and the basement of whatever place we had descended into was suspiciously big, just for holding on to some trading cards, and it was definitely not cheap looking. It looks like where you'd store some expensive stock. I ask her if she is sure this is where she keeps her storage, thinking maybe she is just senile and got lost along the way. But she reassures us that they are just ahead in some clear boxes. Problem is though, the room ahead looked to be pretty empty from where we were standing. There was no storage to be found from what we could see. David and I started exchanging some suspicious glances, and I tried to make an excuse really quickly as to why we could not stay and why we had to go home. It was just something really feeble and on the spot like, oh, I forgot my mom needed me back at so-and-so time, and the old lady just stared directly at me. Out of nowhere, we start to hear a voice coming from the room right ahead of us. It sounded tired and exasperated, like it had been screaming all day long. Even with that, I could tell it was the voice of a little girl, or a little boy maybe. The voice asks, "Is someone else there?" in as loud of a tone as they could manage. David and I look at each other again, and then to the old lady, who is already set off at a pace towards where the voices were coming from. I make the mistake of shouting, "Who is that?" And the person, the child, they start shouting and screaming back. Not just them though. A couple of other voices of young children erupted and told us to help them and that they wanted their parents and that they were kidnapped. They were begging us to get help. The old lady starts shouting furiously in her own language, and I hear footsteps pounding towards us. Some big buff dude appears in the doorway and looks like he is ready to rip us in half. I yell at David to run as fast as he can up the stairs, and the buff dude starts making his way towards us. He closes about half the distance really quickly, and I pull out my knife and point it out towards him, and I yell at him to just fuck off, that I will call the police, that I will stab him and kill him. I was just kind of mumbling whatever words that I could, all slurred into one, in an effort to just keep him away, make him think that I was crazy and that I would stab him. But the fear in my voice, I guess it was a little bit obvious. I told him I would use the knife and that he would not get me. The dude halts for a second, pretending to be thinking about leaving me alone, and then he just jolts towards me in one swift motion, and my brain goes into overdrive, and I am relying purely on instincts. In the space of about 1 second, I grab the knife so tight that it hurts my hand, and then I launch it at the guy with as much force as I could muster. I missed, and the knife flew straight past him at a downward angle because I am weak and crap at throwing. But the knife does hit the old lady in her ankle area. She lets out a shriek, and the men gasped and looked back at her, and using that as my opportunity, I just booked it away from there as fast as I possibly could. I heard no footsteps coming behind me at all, and no one seemed to give chase, so I guess the buff guy went to tend to the old lady and decided that that was more important than grabbing David and I. We both went back to my place after that, and we locked ourselves in my room out of fear that some angry buff man was going to be hunting us down for hurting his mom or grandma or whatever and busting their operation. When my parents got home, I told my dad about what happened and what we had seen, and he berated me endlessly. He called me a stupid, reckless child and told me that I could have easily been killed. He had a few more choice words than stupid, but you get the idea. And he smacked the shit out of me for good measure, while David was still in the house. He made a call to the cops, and they made a stop at our house within the hour. They interviewed me, and I think they interviewed David too, and I told them everything I typed here, minus the details about carrying the knives and about impaling the old lady. I thought that I might go to jail for that and get in a lot of trouble. I just said that I ran immediately and that we ducked away into a crowded area before we could get caught properly. I gave them the address as best as I could. I told them about the kids screaming, and they told us that they would check it out ASAP. They contacted my dad a couple of days later and told him that the place they took us to had been completely gutted and that they left no trace of their identity or any items that they owned. Said that they did find a massive bloodstain in the back corner of the room that they were trying to lead us into though, but they could not match the DNA to any known missing children in any nearby state. I often wonder if they maybe killed those kids for calling out to me as soon as I left as a kind of a punishment. I wonder if maybe I might have saved the lives of some children if I wasn't such a coward and I went straight to the cops after we got away. It's something that I try not to talk about or think about anymore because it leads me to some really dark places in my mind. Okay, back by popular demand, I'm going to tell you all about the time we explored a tunnel system that we found underneath New York City. I suppose found isn't the right word since we learned about it online, but for a long time, not many people knew it even existed or just how vast it actually was. This story also took place around Chinatown and was at the 2nd Avenue subway station that was constructed many, many years ago, but the lines were never connected and finished, and there are currently no plans for it to ever be used. This happened around 2009, I think, maybe 6 months ago or so after we had our scare in Chinatown. David and I cooled down on the exploring for a few months because we were a little bit traumatized, but mostly because my dad started to keep me under lock and key, because he couldn't trust me not to be stupid and get myself killed. I spent most of the time hanging around in my room or in David's room, but once the heat died down, we were off exploring again. During our off time, we started to do some heavy research into other places in New York City that were of interest to us, in anticipation of going outside and exploring once again. YouTube was still in its infancy, but it was a lot less regulated at the time, so it was actually possible to find good, niche content, and we didn't have to struggle to sift through the endless stream of slop that the site is infested with now. We looked at a lot of interesting urban exploration videos, and eventually stumbled across one talking about the 2nd Avenue station underneath Chinatown. We got together some light gear, like a backpack with some food and water, and a couple of flashlights. As well as that, we took some of those glow stick things that you sometimes see, because, well, mainly because we thought that they were cool, and wanted to throw them out and have some cool, spooky lighting. One key mistake that we made was not telling anyone where we were actually going. I mean, we never did before and had no trouble, so why start now, right? Yeah, this is the one time we really should have done. There's definitely an alternate universe where we ended up dead for not doing that shit. We make it there and it's honestly really easy to get in. Apparently it just has never been used, and it just sits abandoned basically. We make our way down, and it's honestly incredible. There are rows upon rows of concrete pillars and walls all drenched in graffiti. We started making our way down this tunnel-like section, and I whip out my flashlight, and David is wearing a cool-ass headlamp that he, borrowed from his dad. The section of tunnel that we were in, I believe, was built in the 1970s, but again, it was just never used, never finished, just left to rot. We saw a ton of junk all littered around, a sleeping bag here and there, but there were no people. It was honestly cool to see some of the tags that people had left on the concrete, as some of them dated back to the 90s and stuff, usually just people's names and no fancy artwork though. As we made our way almost to the end of the tunnel, we came across a concrete stairwell which looked to wind upwards. I say screw it, why not while we're here? Who knows, we could discover something really cool that no one else has seen before. Like I said, we did a little bit of research online and made some mental notes about the place and a vague layout, but we never printed off a map or made anything more than that. The stairwell that we were walking up, I believe, had an exit at the end that came out straight onto the Manhattan Bridge. We came out into a bit of an opening that had the final set of stairs at the end that we just had to clamber up, and then there would be a covering waiting up at the top that we could lift up, and then we would be outside. There were not really any interesting items so far, aside from a load of trash just chucked everywhere. We start to walk towards the staircase, but both David and I came to a sudden stop when we heard a rustling sound at the far left of the room. We both turned around and looked, both fixed to the spot, and we saw what looked to be a gathering of homeless people. One guy looked to be slumped to the ground and trying to get his veins to appear to inject something into himself. God knows what he was trying to inject. I couldn't really make out what it was. I think there were 4 men in total that looked like they had not bathed for an entire century. 2 of them were laying down on some really thin sleeping bags, and they had a kind of a cooking thing in the center that looked like it had been used not too long ago. The final guy is just standing there and just staring off into space. His eyes were bloodshot with a tint of yellow, and his body was kind of all swaying all around, like he could not fully keep his balance or stay in one place. David starts whispering to me, asking what the hell is going on, and he leans in close, but kind of stumbles on the uneven ground and accidentally kicks a few small stones, which end up hitting the wall, and the sound echoes all throughout the place. This catches the standing homeless man's attention, and his focus just snaps and locks straight onto us. He's now staring directly at us. His clothes are bloody and disgusting, and his fingers look like he had completely ripped off his fingernails as far as they could go and had been chewing on the exposed flesh. It looked to be slightly yellowish and kind of infected too. It looked disgusting. I do a kind of awkward wave at the guy and tell him that we're really sorry and that we are just urban exploring and are about to exit up to the bridge. He gives no response at first and just keeps staring at me. He kind of shifts his head all around, like he's looking at us, but like he can't look just by moving his eyeballs around, like he has to move his head to move his eyes. He looks seriously tweaked out, and we are now feeling pretty nervous by this point. Some of his skin, it looked necrotic. It looked like his skin had been rotting, like on his fingers and hands and his arms. The flesh looked dead. I start to hear a very low and deep growling noise emanating not from him, but from the 3 men behind him. All 4 had taken notice of us by this point. David and I decide that now is a good time to start shuffling as slowly as we can towards the steps. We have our trusty knives with us again, but I did not think it would be of much use against some tweaked out homeless people who would most likely try to bite and scratch at us. They looked seriously feral. As we are shuffling, the other 3 move in line with the first standing guy who noticed us, and they have formed a line. They all look similar to the first guy with the nails and the chewed flesh. One of them is wearing shorts, and one of his legs looked to be rotting and like it immediately needed treatment. Like some of the damn bone was exposed and it was obviously infected. A gentle breeze should have had this guy screaming in pain. I tap David really hard, and he instinctively starts to dash up the stairs, and I follow closely behind him. In hindsight, it was probably a really bad choice, but we did not know what else we could really do. I could hear hard, loud stomps coming towards us at lightning speed. It was only the first one who had given chase, I think, but he was running with the force of a heavyweight lifter and proceeded to scuttle up the stairs behind us on all 4s. I was screaming at David to get the hatch open as fast as he could, and we managed to clamber out just in time to shut it on the homeless guy's head. The sunlight from outside felt like heaven, and we sat down on the street for a while, just heavily breathing while holding down the hatch. There was no resistance or banging coming from it, thankfully, so the homeless guy must have just wanted us out and didn't want to possibly deal with the police. Yeah, Hex. Fucking hell. This seriously freaked us out at the time, but hard drugs can do a lot of damage to the brain, and these guys looked like they had been shooting up since birth. They were probably just angry that their nest had been stumbled upon, especially by 2 young stupid kids who they thought might report them maybe. We did not bother reporting them because it looked like they were going to die very soon by the looks of them, and I did not want to get berated by my dad yet again. Homeless and a junkie is a deadly combination, and I advise anyone to stay away from spots where they frequent, especially in New York City. This happened to me when I was around 12 years old. I was on holiday, way up north in Finnish Lapland. It was early spring polar nights, so there was no sun, even in the daytime. I was adventuring around along a snowmobile track leading from our cottage to who knows where. As long as you stay on it, you can go as far as you like, is what my father told me. Wise advice for a 12-year-old, I guess. I walk along until night falls. It's just pitch black everywhere. There are snow-covered fir trees all around, like it's people standing motionless, just staring at you. I start to hear crying, like actual little baby crying, with sobs and all. This really starts to freak me out. The crying rises to a wail, and then turns into a full-on female scream for 2 seconds, and then back to sobbing and little baby crying. The crying starts to approach. I am too scared to move or look around to find the silhouette of whoever is crying among the trees. I am just crouching there, shitting my pants for what feels like hours, slowly freezing my ass off. The crying was continuing all that time. Sometimes it was close by. Sometimes it sounded like it was coming from farther away in the woods. While crouching, I remember reading about some old creature called liekios in some old book on old Finnish folklore. They are the souls of the unwanted babies whose mothers had them in the woods and either left them there to die or murdered them outright. The legend says they are left to forever cry in the woods and tempt unsuspecting people into getting lost. I eventually realize I will soon be too frozen to make my way back to the cottage at all, so my hopeless dash turned into panic shambling. I was still following the snowmobile track, not even looking up. The crying starts following me. I finally get back to the cottage, and I do not tell anyone. I eventually calm down. I go upstairs to sleep. I hear the creature start crying again, outside beneath my window. I heard it for a few hours that night, but come morning, when I'd finally drifted off to sleep, it had stopped. I heard it a few more times in that forest, but I never really got an explanation.